If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I'm back with a response video to a new thread that got started up earlier in the week, and this is an interesting thread, and it's an appropriate thread since we're in the middle of spooky season. Ooh. Yeah, we're in October, which is Halloween month, a great time of the year for a lot of people. So, my good friend, as well as Shadow Called podcast co-host, it's Mr. Scott, which, by the way, if you haven't subscribed to his channel yet, what are you waiting for? Link will be in the description box for you guys to check out his channel. He does reaction videos to songs, to epic rap battles of history, and he's also on Twitch every Thursday night doing bass covers, and he's been doing a lot of cool themes as of late, like playing songs from albums in 1982, for example. So yeah, his YouTube and his Twitch will be in the description box for you guys to check out. He's practically like a metal father of mine at this point, but yeah, he started up this thread, and I actually hope that people who are watching this right now that make videos respond to this thread from Mr. Scott, and we are talking 10 horror-themed metal songs. Because really, horror and metal pretty much go hand in hand perfectly, like a good hamburger and french fries go together. Pretty much equal footing when it comes to horror and metal, and over the years in like horror movies, especially since the 80s, you would see, like, metal songs on horror soundtracks. Like, take, for example, Dawkins' Dream Warriors on Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and Hellraiser by Motorhead being in Hellraiser. I believe it was Hellraiser 3, I believe. Yeah, there's a ton of horror-themed metal songs, and there's only going to be one on my list that's going to be a repeat from It's Mr. Scott's list, because I wanted to showcase some different songs that he didn't mention on the video here. So without further ado, let's get started, and we'll start off with the repeat one from It's Mr. Scott's video. And when it comes to horror-themed metal song list, you can't do it without at least bringing up Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath off of Black Sabbath. I mean, not only is it a horror-themed metal song, but it's the song that started metal as a whole. I mean, that classic riff of just 3 chords. I mean, that's one of the creepiest things ever written in music history. And I mean, the song itself, it's not only what started metal, but also even doom metal, because it's so slow and atmospheric and haunting and evil sounding. And it's perfect for a horror film, or, well, it's actually based on the, well, I want to say it was based off the Boris Karloff movie Black Sabbath. At least that's where the name of the band comes from, but probably from the same, for the same thing for the song would come from that movie, which would make total sense. But yeah, the atmosphere, the lyrical themes, and the impact it's had on metal as a whole, as well as even horror fans, I would say Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath should be on every horror-themed metal song list. And now moving on to the next song, and speaking of Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, I have Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne. Of course, it's pretty self-explanatory, that song. It's basically about a werewolf, or a human turning into a werewolf when the full moon is out, like every werewolf trope you can think of. But the song itself, it's also one of the best metal songs of the 80s, and it's like this like speed metal, furious track with these like cool riffs by Jakey Lee, and of course Ozzy singing his ass off. And even the music video, like, forget just the song, check out the music video, and it makes perfect sense for a horror movie or a horror show, somewhere along those lines. So yeah, I would say Ozzy Bark at the Moon is another highly essential horror-themed metal song that definitely gets you into that werewolf vibe. even though I'm not a huge fan of werewolves. It's a killer song for that kind of creature. And now to conclude the first third of the list of really the essential classics, in my opinion. And honestly, I was shocked Mr. Scott didn't have this band on the list, but you have to have Slayer on this list, and there are a ton of Slayer songs that could have been on this list. However, the one that I think stands out the most in terms of horror-themed songs, it's gotta be Dead Skin Mask off of Seasons in the Abyss. I mean, Dead Skin Mask as a whole, that song with that, like, almost borderline doom groove, those evil melodic riffs that you get, and just overall, it's like that song could be easily responsible for a big wave of death metal bands that followed suit, trying to replicate that, like, evil, sinister, slow sound, but done in their own way. But of course, Dead Skin Mask, I mean, all about, of course, someone making a mask out of dead skin. It's like almost Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque, but it could be from another source. And hearing the little girl at the end of the song saying, "Please help me," that's really creepy, which definitely adds on more to the horror aspect that the song is truly projecting into your ear holes. But yeah, Dead Skin Mask by Slayer, an essential horror-themed metal song. Now, the next four, the second third of the list, we now get into the death metal section. I decided to split it up into 3 parts. The first 3 are like essential classics from classic bands. Now, the second third is going to be all death metal. Then the third will be some classics, but perhaps are lesser known, that have horror vibes. But these next 4 are all death metal, and you can't do a horror-themed metal song without Cannibal Corpse, and again, pretty much every Cannibal Corpse song you could have on here, but for me, the one that stands out the most, Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead off of The Bleeding. I've always been a big fan of that song ever since I heard it when I saw the YouTube clip of the music video on Beavis and Butthead, and then listening to the song in full, and I just fell in love with Cannibal Corpse right then and there. And the music video for the song, too, perfectly encapsulates what this song is all about. Like a guy being operated on in a hospital that's somehow still alive and staring through the eyes of the dead. And of course, the last album with Chris Barnes and Cannibal Corpse, and he does put on a hell of a performance. Say what you will about Barnes now, but he kicked ass in the early to mid-90s, regardless as to how you feel about him now. But Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead is my pick for Cannibal Corpse for this list. And if you excuse me for a moment. Much better. And then for the second one, now this is a repeat band from Mr. Scott's video, but I have a different song. Of course, probably a required band to have on a list like this is Mortician, masters of brutal death metal from New York. However, my song that I chose for Mortician is Zombie Apocalypse off of the Zombie Apocalypse EP. I mean, of course, that classic line in the beginning, I forget which movie it's from, but that classic line, "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." I forget the name of the movie that's from. Somebody tell me in the comments. I feel dumb for not remembering it off the top of my head. But of course, and then the song itself, perhaps even one of the catchiest brutal death metal songs ever. Like, yeah, you get your blast beat and thrash metal sections here and there, but for the most part, it's groove-laden with slams and chugs. And of course, Will Romer's voice, the deepest vocal you could hear in all of death metal. And that bass tone, the heaviest bass tone to ever exist in metal, bar none. And if anybody says different, they're wrong. But yeah, Zombie Apocalypse by Mortician, another one on the list. Now beginning the halfway point of not only the second third of this video, but the second half of the list itself. Now I'm going to go with an underground one, and that is Hooded Menace. And really, every Hooded Menace every Hooded Menace song, English, could be on this list because they write pretty much horror story songs for a Death Doom band. However, I'm going to go with a more recent cut, and that's Chime Diabolicus from their latest album, The Tridentous Bell. I don't know, it's just when this album I could put on this list as a whole, but Chime Diabolicus, there's just something about that song that just sticks out like a sore thumb. Like the melodies that you get, the almost like Merciful Fate King Diamond influence that you get, well, really on the whole album, but especially on this song with how the melodies progressed and how it kind of starts off on a little bit more of a higher pace before it dooms like classic Hooded Menace. And of course, lyrically, it's gory, it's horrific, it's typical Hooded Menace for you, and Chime Diabolicus was my standout pick from their last album that came out just over a year ago, and I wanted to give it some love on this list because Hooded Menace needs more love in general. And then the final one from the death metal section of this list, and that is, of course, Left Hand Path by Entombed. The song Left Hand Path. Because after all, you get like the scream from Phantasm, and they do the fucking score to Phantasm towards the middle of the song, that melodic section in the middle, and then they do their own version of the score to Phantasm, which fits so perfectly with the song, and the song itself is one of the top 5 greatest death metal songs ever created. Rest in peace, LG Petrov. And the song itself, it's thrashy, it's groove-laden, it's intense, it gets doomy at the end with the solos, and of course that Phantasm score all throughout. I mean, what more can I say about the song that I haven't said already? It's a masterpiece, and it belongs in a horror-themed metal song list. But now on to the final third of this list, and now we get into some classic bands, but perhaps some not so obvious choices from these bands. Now I know that from Mr. Scott's video he had King Diamond, and as he should, but I wanted to include the other King Diamond band, and that is Merciful Fate. And the song I went for is Nightmare from Don't Break the Oath. After all, I mean, that song is not only catchy, but it's just filled with all sorts of musical shifts and tempo changes where it'll go from, like, speed metal to classic metal, and even gets a tad groovy, just briefly in the track. But of course, one of the longer songs on the album, and it just, those falsettos from King Diamond are just so magical, and even like the grittier vocals that you get from King Diamond, especially on that song, it's like you're getting the best of King Diamond on that track. And of course, the riffs, yeah, like I said, it's catchy, but they're filled with virtuosity, even in the leads, because Hank Sherman and Michael Diener know how to fucking shred. So yeah, Nightmare by Merciful Fate. Now the penultimate song on the list, and this was one I was kind of surprised Mr. Scott didn't have on his list, but I had to put it on here, and it's one of my favorite songs from this band, and that is, of course, The Saw's the Law by Sodom off of their album Better Off Dead. Now, of course, there are 2 versions of the song. There's the album version, which is like 4+ minutes, and then there's the extended version, which was released not too long after this on an EP called The Saw's the Law, which is like 6 minutes. I'm preferably talking about the extended version, the 6-minute cut, where you actually get the chainsaw and that like cool groovy break in the middle leading into the solo. And of course, the song based off of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And hell, even Tom Angel Ripper wanted to do a music video with footage from the film, but they didn't have the budget or the copyrights to do that, so they just had the song out for itself. But live, they would have somebody on stage with the chainsaw going to town during the guitar solo. So I had to include that song on this list because I feel it would be a glaring omission from a lot of people's lists, because that song, not only is it catchy and it kicks ass, but of course it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Who doesn't love the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? So yeah, Sodom, the Saw's the Law. And now for the final band that I'm going to be bringing up on this video is going to be a bit of an interesting one, but it's the longest song on this list, and one of my favorite metal songs of all time, and that is, of course, Dante's Inferno by Iced Earth off of Burnt Offerings. Say what you will about Iced Earth, but you can't deny they were an amazing band, and well, they're technically still active, but just 2 guys right now, and who knows what's going to happen going forward. But the song Dante's Inferno, it's 16 plus minutes of just thrashy, epic, evil, power metal brilliance, brutality even. Like, it gets brutal at times, but of course the song Dante's Inferno, based off of the book Dante's Inferno, and just Matt Barlow, his vocals just go everywhere, from like power metal delivery, thrash delivery, and even his really cool like low and higher clean vocals. And of course you get some fantastic fucking riffs on this song, courtesy of John Schaefer being an excellent riff writer and songwriter for Iced Earth. And just all the different shifts you get, where it gets thrashy, and then it slows down to doom metal territory, especially in the more melodic sections. And like those evil, sinister chants that you get just add to the hellish atmosphere that this song is projecting all over the place. And without a doubt, the best Iced Earth song that they ever created, and certainly should be a song on a horror-themed metal song list. Now, that pretty much does it for this list. Now, this was kind of difficult because there are so many great horror-themed metal songs out there, like some that Mr. Scott had on his list, like Halloween by Halloween, or King Diamond's song Halloween, Typo Negative's Halloween in Heaven. I could have put on here Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast. There's just a ton of killer horror themed metal songs that I could have put on this list, and it wouldn't be wrong, but I wanted to do these 10 because I feel they're quintessential or often overlooked. So a recap: Dante's Inferno by Iced Earth, The Saw's the Law by Sodom, Nightmare by Merciful Fate, Left Hand Path by Entombed, Chime Diabolicus from Hooded Menace, Zombie Apocalypse by Mortician, Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead by Cannibal Corpse, Dead Skin Mask by Slayer, Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne, and Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. And that does it for this video, and of course I'll say it again, for those of you who are watching that make YouTube videos and you want to make a response to it, feel free, and don't forget to tag It's Mr. Scott, since he's the one that created this thread. I certainly hope that Necrotic Nick from the Thralls of Metal does this video, because I would be curious to hear what kind of choices he would have for this list. I would also love to see Dreadful Minutes. I would also like to see Quest for Metal. A bunch of people I would love to see do this video, because I'd be curious to hear other people's song choices. But anyways, that does it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Horns high, and I'll see you guys later.
You know, it was pretty organic. I have a rocker dad. Growing up, there were not only like driving in his car and around the house, there was great music playing, but if I was ever able to sneak into the man cave of the basement that he had, that was off limits after a certain hour, there was a cool collection of vinyl. That's where titles like Fistful of Metal, Violence and Force, Number of the Beast, Kiss's Destroyer, which was massive for me. You can imagine being a 6-year-old kid and pulling out the
Yeah.
LP cover for Destroyer
Oh
for
yeah.
the time, how life changing that could be.